Again, we're doing this, huh? It's the nature of a broken screen, I guess. All right, so where we're at on the process. Well, I downloaded the free trial for RPG Maker XP. I did not go with 2003 yet. I want to see what I could do with XP. XP, if you remember correctly, was what I was talking with RPG Maker XP had the not 6 OS compatible. It's not built for it, and I did some looking around and use it for both Windows 10, which it doesn't mention, and on a 64-bit OS. Just not built to run on them. 64-bit OSs can run some 32-bit OS software, so it seems he played with it earlier. So it should work. I downloaded it. It worked. It installed. I did have a little bit of an issue with opening a save file folder, and it said unable because it's trying to create it in the programs directory. All you have to do is just give it another folder, like your documents folder, or your put it on my desktop, so I know exactly where it is at all times. So yeah, I'm able to use the RPG Maker, and I downloaded my copy that I was entitled to use, but I have not used yet for months. Was the build engine, and I pulled that in, and immediately, like, I downloaded version 2.0 and started it, and it immediately told me that it needed a up. So I said, do the update, and it went through the process of trying to update it, and like the build box loaded was 80 megabytes, and the update was 78 megabytes, and I'm like, are you kidding me? And so it's like it's almost a whole new program at that point. And I didn't end up installing the updates because it asked me to reinstall BuildBox again. I'm like, I just put one on there. I don't want box on my system. So that one was a little bit weird. But I haven't played with them much, either program. I was looking at the pricing for BuildBox, and they have like a $32 a month or a $15 a month. The trick with the $15 a month program is it's billed annually, not monthly, and the $15 a month gives you the ability to create. I'm trying to remember. It's like pricing was. Come on, you can do this. And $10 a month gets you one maximum of worlds, 15 maximum scenes, make as many games as you want, menu editor and animations, action effects and logic, advertising, such and such. Does not give you the ability to do a customizable loading screen. Additional export options. Now, I think the one I have is a indie one, which is $35 a month. And that gives you 3 maximum worlds, 5 maximum scenes. Now, you could go with the Pro version, which is unlimited and unlimited maximum scenes. And that's the biggest difference between the Indie and the Pro. It's $100 though, $100 a month. Now there is somewhere squirreled away here, there was an option you could purchase, just downright purchase it with a one-time payment and have indefinite usage. But it was some exorbitant, like I think it was like $600 for the price of it. It's like, I don't know that I want to pay $800 until I've tried it out and figured it out. So I ended up paying, what did I pay? Annual. So annually paid it's $20 a month for the Indie level. So 20 times 12 equals, it's about $240. So that's sort of what I paid for a year's access to 3 maximum worlds and 45 maximum scenes. What distinction they make for what the scenes are. And what I did for this to get it was, you go through their website, you make your purchase, and then you have to go to the website, go to log in. If you go to your billing, it tells you your billing, and then it says licenses, and under that you have the as you've purchased with the purchase. It has Mac OS 64-bit if you want to do that, or Windows OS 64-bit. You download that, you install it, and when you open it, it gives you a prompt for using your key. Now, your key detail or licenses under the specific game, there is a thing that says details underneath the name of it, and then it has the key number. And it also has a section for upgrade your plan. And it's saying my version is iOS, Android, Amazon, OSK, tvOS, WinStore, WinExe, and Steam export capabilities. I don't know what other capabilities you would need. All right. And so that's sort of where I am on that. Licenses. I did also see a point where I could get BuildBox 3 version 1.0. And I don't know the distinction between. So I can look into that further at some point. I still have several months, I think. Licenses. When was this started? Doesn't tell me the date. Billing was. I have 1 times BuildBox C on the 4th of September. So active. Price I paid was about $200. And then, yeah, so I'm good till September to use this. I lose it, and I'm not sure I'd go back to it. It's an expensive way to do it, and I don't know, like I haven't done enough with it to know for sure yet whether or not I think it's valuable enough to keep investing in it. Because like my feeling is, and when I did the installation of BuildBox, what I got was halfway through a prompt for of C++. So it really seems to me that this is just sort of a program that builds it based off of C++. So it's like it gives you a middleman between you and the programming language for the most commonly used abilities to build these games. I feel like at some point it might just be easier to teach myself to build games in a native uh, programming languages and not using these third-party middlemen programs. So that's sort of where I am on that right now. So I opened up both of those programs. I opened up both of those programs and just gave them a little look around. What are we doing? Please don't crash. Don't crash. Okay. Yeah, so I did a look around and exploration of all those installation and how to potentially work with these programs, and they both ran decently. I opened up the RPG Maker, started a project, and told it to be a map. Essentially, it gave me I think it gave me grassy territory as the default, and then I installed some rocks, and that was really as far as it went. I didn't save anything, and I didn't try to build a full blown map. I did go into as layers, so it has 3 different layers that you can have. You have bottom layer, middle layer, and if I remember correctly, players, the character interaction with things is going to be on middle layer, so that it's possible for things to be under the character, so he walks over them, or over the character, so he objects. And then I went into, there's a 4th slot, 1, 2, and 3, that's events. And I went into the events, and it took me a little second to figure it out. There's an event set, like if you bump into something, it activates an event. And then it's a little vague, like there are a few things, it activates now, it activates quickly, so on and so forth. But if you go click on that, there's a window with like a sign in it, and you click on that, and it pulls open a separate window. There's no button or like indicator that if you do that, something they have to know that that's what you're going to do. So I click that, pulls open a window. It has 3 frames within that window that have a massive events happen when you trigger that event location. And so that's about as far as I got exploring. I didn't look at the potential for using Ruby programming for adding functionality and capabilities to the game. So I mean, I feel like so far I don't have any experience with what 2000 version of RPG Maker is like, but the 2000 or the version has, it looks like all the capabilities I would want from an RPG game maker, and I haven't even explored capabilities I can add with Ruby programming. So I may end up, if I end up purchasing a copy of it, I may end up a copy of RPG Maker XP. Now, that would be a $25 roughly. It's $24.99 or $25.99, and it's not older system, and it's not as versatile as maybe the newer copies. But like projects in the past, when I was younger, I may have mentioned that I'm a Star Wars fan, and when I was younger, I kind of got into building board games. One of the things that is a game in Star Wars is the game of Sabek. It's a card game. It's the card game with which won the Millennium Falcon. And there are some rules that are detailed somewhere that you can build a playable version of the game. And I did that, and I composed all the art for the decks that I built using ClarisWorks, which was a Mac operating system uh, art. It's essentially MS Paint, better than MS Paint, because MS Paint gives you the ability to add like pieces and stack them on top of each other. Works, at least the old version of ClarisWorks, on a Mac that was a pre OS 10 Mac, OS 7.5, and ClarisWorks came installed on that. The old version of ClarisWorks had the ability to tint, so I could highlight a section of could highlight a shape that I had made and tint it like a blue, and it made it look like there was a transparent pane of light blue tinted glass over a section of image. And it also had, I think it had a blending feature, so you could blend edges. And they removed those features in later versions of the Claris, but the version I had it, and I used that to make I took still images of background Star Wars settings, and I took still images of characters from Star Wars settings, and I stacked the characters on top of the. I oftentimes made the lightsaber blades myself by doing tinted a dark red, a bright red, and a white, and I stacked them one inside each other with just edges around each one, and it made a lightsaber blade appear where there wasn't one before. And so I did that. And I built these backgrounds, and then I did frames, a sort of a electronic general user interface, a GUI interface, like a science fiction frame around them, with gauges of the point value of the card on one side, with an icon of the name of the card across the top, and like I built a deck of cards that I could play this game with in this primitive graphic editing software. Now, this was not the sort of software that was meant to do that level of work. Most people don't. They use it for clip art and like pie charts and simple infographics things. I pushed it to the level of editing photographs and using transparent layers. And so like I'm the ability to use a thing not as most people use it. Where's my other screen? There we go. I'm fairly confident to use a piece of software in ways that they're usually not intended to be used, and most people don't use them to do that. So I think XP, while it's older and doesn't have a lot of the flash bang capabilities of the more modern ones, I'm pretty sure I can the edge of what I can do with it. I should be able to do a fair amount with it. BuildBox, like I said, built anything with it yet, so I can't speak to its abilities to do much. I will figure it out over the next day or so whether it's something that I may invest in again in the future. But I have between now and September I have about half a year, 7 months, that I could build games in this BuildBox system. So I think I'm going to do several games in it in the meantime and just kind of use it as much as I can and, see what kind of limits it has. If I hit some hard limits with it, that mean I won't be able to do as many things as I think I would want to potentially. I can already feel to a certain degree that it's not meant to do some of the things I want to do with it. Like one of the games is a side scroller game that um, side game, maybe more of a platformer game that I can play using some of the artwork that I used to do based off of uh, like a week ago when I did the charcoal drawing. The the Sume ink style used for that. Um, I built a web comic. I built a whole story, and I started the web comic, and I got about a 8 months to a year into doing the web comic, and life fell apart to a degree that I couldn't continue doing it at the time. So I ended up setting, never gotten back to it. But I have a story that would cover years of storyline in the web comic, and I got to thinking like it would be kind of ink landscape style video game using the backstory and world building that I did for the webcomic. Kind of enjoy making a webcomic that does that, or a video game that you could play in that setting with those characters. Um, and I could probably do some of it in BuildBox because it is essentially just a platform. There are hard limits on like it's it's best at building detail where you're going through a terrain that is set up of like 4 or 5 individual scenes cycle through and through over and over again. And if you take 5 scenes and you have them appear in random order, it can using the territory infinitely. Um, but it's just the same path. So you can do Mario World in that, where you're, or a Flappy Birds especially, where you're infinitely going to be within that terrain and it loops. Or you can do a few things like I think the thing I've seen is like you can't your worlds. So like you leave this one and you go to the next one. Mine has a limit on 3 worlds, and what it is like for the most part in one game, you can't transition easily from former to a say a free roaming, or like you can't go from scrolling game to a Mortal Kombat style game where it's a fixed screen size because they're games, and when you open up Build Box, you start a type of game. There, I can't find the video tutorials on how you can use Build Box. So that they do a lot with it. It's not meant to do all things, and again, most of this from me trying to do it in ways it's not intended to be used. But my intention for that game would be to take a character moving through a terrain and avoiding monsters or hazards or traps, and then I want to do small pieces, but I don't think there's the ability to do cinematic pieces. And then from the cinematic pieces, do a person versus person kind of combat where the other person is an AI, and it's a still screen, not a scrolling one. Like I don't. There was the video on YouTube that detailed a sort of a go around for that, where you can make like a level where you play one style of game, and it gives you the ability to unlock another type of game. And so it's possible to do something like that, but it's a tricky one, and I still As far as I can tell, it still doesn't let me do um, cinematic scenes, and so it's like I'll have to figure out a few things. And part of the limit is like the price I paid was like $200 to $300 BuildBox license for a year. And to get that price instead of $100 a month, I ended up choosing 3 worlds max and 45 scenes. 5 scenes, I might be able to stretch the use of that pretty far with looping. Uh, some of the hacks that I could use to get around the limitations of it are things like is a fully interactive moving across the terrain. World 2 is a non-interactive scene that plays out. It's like a video game where none of your buttons do anything and the characters move automatically. So instead of like you take character A, your character Aleph, and you're level 1, and you move your character through level 1. And when you reach the end, reach the middle, you can activate an event that teleports you to World 2, and in World 2, character that looks just like Aleph but isn't interacting with the environment in essentially an animation, making your characters in World 2 act like moving villains that you, and even the alternate version of Aleph, the beta at that point, that you can't distinguish visually for game mechanics is a separate character, interact with that scene in a way that you don't have control over. And when the scene is playing out, it hits a trigger event that then ports you back over to the middle or the end of the previous realm. Now, that would be maybe doing something like a cinematic scene, but the biggest problem with that is it uses 2 worlds. And if you use both of those worlds, I have a limit of 3 worlds that I can use. So now at a point where I only have the ability to do one other world. And if I want to do gameplay where I have cinematics, side scroller, and combat scenes all together, I'm going to hit the edge of what I can do with that software and that setup. Now, if I were to pay the bigger price to get the unlimited scenes and unlimited worlds, I could push that further. But I'm not sure the capabilities that I have to do a lot of workarounds just to get those features within my interest to pay 200. Like, I don't think I'm ever going to earn $200 a month from anything I create using BuildBox. If I do, it may make sense for me to invest in that. If I get enough that I can make $200 in a year from a game that I make from BuildBox, go back and see if I can find out what it would take to just outright buy it. But at the same token, like BuildBox price, like $800 for an outright buy, I think. And if I wanted to do 1 year usage at the unlimited level, is like I think it's 100 if you do it monthly. Forget what the full price is on an annual basis, but like price wise, I don't think that makes sense for me. when I'm looking at RPG Maker, and RPG Maker has their own game development for those types of games, and it looks like it may just be a one-time purchase. Let me pull it up right now, see if I can find out. That might make more sense for what I want to do in the long run. Like that. So RPG Maker, that's visual novel. MV Manga Maker, Character Maker blog. Huh. On the front page, they don't have that information there, but they have down here IG Maker, which is what it's in the it's on the rpgmaker.com page. And IG Maker is Indie Game Now. Do action RPGs, 2D shooters, so to me that makes more sense. It seems like it'll probably do what BuildBox can do, and it'll work with my computer. It's only $60. I can download a free trial and try it out for a month, and if it does what I need it to do, purchase it. So $60 as a one-time purchase, as far as I know. $100 a month for a year. I would go with IG Maker before I go for BuildBox. I just logistically, it makes more sense to me. All right, so that's sort of where I am on right now. I'm pretty sure I can do everything I need to do for this. I've been contemplating zombie game, what sort of mechanics I want to use, and I do sort of feel like I want to make it a mobile game. So I'm looking at those types of games, but I'm like, what controls do I want to use to do? And so, like, do I want to do something where, like, swiping makes your character move a certain number of spaces on the screen? And if I do that, do I build a essentially a side scroller territory where you loop back around and it randomly inserts those different sections at different intervals and forces you to climb over certain points and whatnot, and set up random events along the way so that, like, you encounter a car and as you see a baby inside, so now you have your zombie baby that you can throw at people. Like that may be the way to do it. There's also the I thought about, like, based off of like Flappy Birds. If you have your screen and you just tap 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 tap, your zombie moves. The faster you tap, moves. But if you stop tapping, it'll slump to the ground. And that mechanic may be something I can do if there's an object that you can throw and you need to pick it up, have the character slump on top of it. So you move, like tap to the right and you move to the right, tap to the left and you move to the left. And if you're tapping and you see, oh, let him drop on top of the brick. And then when you tap to pick up again, he's got the brick in hand. And then while tapping to move forward, tap on the opponent quickly while keeping him upright to see if he can pitch the brick at the opponent. And that is pretty much going to be a standard distance. It's going to be an arc. And you want to be able to hit them in the head down and be able to go over and eat their brains. If you clip them in the leg, they might stumble, but still not be down enough without danger. So, I mean, there's the possibility of doing that. But to me, that one seems more complicated. The tapping as mechanism of motion while trying to throw the brick. Like, there's a lot of things to juggle, right? Whereas just standing upright and to move in either direction will get you the ability to walk in those directions. And then if you have an object, you pick up object by tapping it. And if you want to throw it at somebody, you walk close to them and you tap again to throw. It's two mechanisms. That's motion by swipe, object pick up and throw by tap. That makes it a lot easier to do that. I think I also want to have a mechanism for ducking. So you can bind objects so you won't be hit by bullets. And I should also do tapping on, say, like a stack of boxes that'll tip over and make a ramp for you to climb over things. So it's swipe and tap. It makes it a mobile, functional game. But you can use keys like the right and left arrow and the for the tap button on a keyboard. So it makes it possible to use it in multiple formats. I'm not sure that's so, but it might be good enough. And I got to thinking, like, I was talking about last night how, like, do you want there to eventually be an end? Or do you want it to infinitely loop? And I feel like I kind of a little bit of both. I want to build a game where the end is so far away that, like, when you finally find it, it's like a rotten that far. And I feel like the high scores by the time you die, like the game goes, like you could build a survival game where essentially it's just like how long can you survive, and you accrue points for say second wave, and like when the game is finally over when you die, if you've survived for 50 seconds, you get a bronze medal or something like that. And go back to my list of like the anniversary gifts that I was talking about yesterday as the play buttons that I may make for YouTube. There are, I think there are like 60. I could use those point values to 60. I think there are probably about 30 to 40 different anniversary tiers. And if you use those as a list of like the different material with are the different material play the prizes that you get, the medal. Like the first medal you're gonna get is the paper bag having completed to 1 point. And then 2 points would be the cotton badge or a patch. And you get all the way up to the gold badge, the platinum badge, the diamond badge, or whatever, and you just kind of climb up to those levels, points you accumulate in the game. Now, in my case, like the only real value of what you're trying to achieve as a zombie in the game, eating brains. So, for each brain you get 1 point, and when you are finally killed by the humans, your point value of how many brains you manage to successfully will be the indicator of your high score, essentially. And that's workable. I think that's achievable. I'm not sure if I'm still going to make the mechanic where like uh, injuries slow you, and the more brains you eat, the better you are. Um, so like, start the game at midpoint. If you're injured, the slower you shamble. If at midpoint you eat brains and not get injured, you get point and you gradually get better. That's a possibility. I still may do it. I think it unnecessarily complicates the game and playing. But I also feel like it adds value to that function of the game. I don't want the game to just be like, oh, like I'm thinking, is there a way to be a pacifist zombie? Could you play the game by avoiding as much injury as possible and get to the end point? That may be worthwhile seeing if I could make it possible. Like, uh, have have the character moving through a city. Injuries decrease your point where you'll collapse and game over. Um, if you use bricks to stun people or throw things to, and then run past them, um, as much as a zombie runs, you get past them, you can keep going and get further and further. You will not increase your points made, but you might be able to keep going long enough to reach the mall at the end without hurting, killing a human. And to make the gameplay potentially possible that way might be worth trying. And so that's a possibility. Now, the point values you accumulate along the way for a high score, or you can go for pacifist completion. Um, and there isn't really a way to do both. But if I'm going to do it that way, reaching the end point, legitimately hitting the end of the terrain at the mall, like, where do you time that? What time interval do you need that to be at for that to still allow it for a worthwhile game? Like, if running at like a reasonable zombie speed, past would 20 minutes play or 30 minutes play or 45 minutes play or 2.5 hours play be the right end point at? Don't know. I like. I'm now starting to really like the idea of pacifist. Where is he going? Do I want to make it the mall though? Why would you go to the mall? Because people are trapped there. But if you're playing not to eat other people, then why would you seek that out? I don't know. That's just like a story element. Now, Slime Boy, I'm trying to sort of write a story arc with a f- in it for it because it's an RPG. You want a story for an RPG style game. It's not enough to just have moving through encounter monster or villain or hero, fight them, and then um, power up, move to next phase. Like, I mean, you can kind of do that, but I feel like it has like a goal to achieve at the end, and um, like up, um, and adventures you have to go on to get to certain parts that enable you to reach your goal. I I feel like I have to play on that mechanic of normal everyday schlub. You get transformed by your interaction with the supernatural element of the game, origin story of Slime Boy. And the consequences of that interaction for you, you are still you. You still have the sort of anxiety about the supernatural world, but now that you have powers, you want to be seen as potential, but everybody sees you as potentially a monster. I want to play up on that element a little bit. Like, what does the story look like of a monster who's really heroic? Is it sort of like a Hulk? It sort of like Spider-Man is seen by J.J. Jameson. So I got to figure that one out, like how to play that right. And in the end, like, what is your goal? Like, in an environment where you have heroes, villains, monsters, and this character who's really in the middle of it all, who wants people to not see them as a monster, I feel like that's a goal, but it's not an achievable. Like, how what you do to get to that is what makes the difference. Like, you can keep chasing trying to look good by doing minor events to make yourself look heroic, but there always has to be that end goal in sight, like the whole uh, meeting of superheroes to uh, audition new members, like earn your right to get into a competition like that. That seems kind of hokey, and I don't really want to use that narrative. But I, I think I'm like, I think you probably get my point. Where what I'm saying is like, to be a hero is a motivation for the character, but it's by which you achieve that should be the goal of the game. And I don't know that the character should aim for to achieve that would be. And if I build this game to do this, do I also path where the character can become a super villain, where I can go the other direction? And if so, like if you do one thing on one of those paths, are you ever go back? Can you go down the first two stations on the villain path and then at some point reform? Or is there a middle ground where you do neither for the entire game and you just randomly go through encounter after encounter? midline, neither good nor bad character with powers. I hadn't really thought about that potential. My goal had always been to, the character's going to become a hero someday. Be a villain. Maybe I should build a game that gives you the potential to do that. So what I need to do is dabble with the BuildBox game engine and see if I can build out a scrolling map of a city that you as a zombie have to trek across and figure out how far we need to make that loop before you read, if I ever want to do that. I still think, I still want to have an endpoint you can reach. Check that enables you to pacifist run. What would that endpoint be? So I got to do a test run of like the basic mechanics, the tap to throw, swipe to move, and like a duck mechanic and a push mechanic. And then, make it also possible to do with the keyboard. So map, actions. Then I got to figure out the graphics and audio for it. Worked out. I should pretty much have the game done. So that one is part of the reason why these are easier kinds of games to build. Whereas RPG games, I have to build a whole story. I have to build a whole world, points of interaction with that world, events that prohibit previous events from being accessible ever again, and an achievable end goal that meets the character motive for the story element. It's a much more complicated thing to build an RPG. But I can do a first adventure, set the world, set the character, and do like a playtestable game demo. And expand on it later. So I think that's pretty much what I'm going to be working on over the next couple of days, is to get both of those, first adventure of Slime Boy and hopefully the entire mechanics of the world of the zombie game worked out. Then by Friday, hopefully, I will get the game worked out. The graphics for the RPG game, I may end up just using the default graphics CG Maker, so it's going to look more fantasy than science fiction-y. But as a mechanism for proof of concept, I think that's probably the way I want to go with it for right now. I can build my own graphics for it, which is one of the appeals of using RPG Maker, is you can do a whole fabricated from scratch set of graphics for your game, and that's totally worth doing. Get the Slime Boy game right in the long run, I think. All right, we're coming up on an hour. Thanks, and see you guys tomorrow.